Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. As leader of the North Carolina Senate, Phil Berger is one of the state's most powerful politicians. But he faces what could be his most competitive GOP primary since taking office more than 20 years ago. Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page is gunning for the seat, and he's targeting Berger's long legislative history. WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht has been tracking the race, and he joins us now. Paul, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me back.
Paul, the race for a Rockingham County state Senate seat is getting a lot of attention, in large part because of the incumbent. For listeners who don't follow state politics, explain who Phil Berger is and why he matters.
Let's start with how laws are made in North Carolina. They come up through our General Assembly, which has two chambers, the state Senate and the state House of Representatives, and then bills go to the governor if they pass those two chambers, and he can sign them into law or veto them or let them become law without a signature, all that. So you have essentially three people that are the gate holders to bills becoming law. You have the House Speaker, who can, endorse or block bills that he doesn't like. And then you have the Senate leader. That's Phil Berger. And since Republicans took over state government back in 2011 as part of what was called back then the Republican Revolution, Phil Berger has been the gatekeeper for laws in North Carolina, at least in the state Senate. There's very little that can get done in this state without Berger's support. And so that makes him extremely powerful. I mean, we can argue, who's the most powerful or whatever, but clearly his finger is on one of the very few buttons in the state.
Now, he's facing Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page. Why does Page, knowing that Berger is such a powerful Republican, why does Sam Page, a career law enforcement officer, think that he can be better at this than Berger?
The short answer is that one could argue, and Page hasn't uttered these exact words, but that Berger has been carried away with his own success and power. Page essentially argues that Berger has become so important and has the ear of so many people that he's lost touch with the people on the ground in Rockingham and Guilford counties. Page says, as someone who has, I believe, more than 40 years of law enforcement experience, including 7 terms as sheriff in Rockingham County, that he speaks to people in the community. He hears what they want and don't want. He hears their fears and their needs and more about their daily concerns than Phil Berger does, since Phil Berger is, in Raleigh and at times going to Washington and things like that. And Page is, taking trips to Washington too. But his argument is, Phil Berger's out there dealing with state stuff. I want to represent you here in Rockingham County and parts of Guilford County. That's the pitch he's making.
And I suspect that Berger doesn't agree with that. What does he say?
Well, Berger would say that his record of passing bills that include funding for Rockingham and Guilford County's needs, not just community needs like funding for a fire department or a health clinic, but also economic development projects, including, he mentioned in our conversation, funding for the Greensboro Airport and places like that. He would say that money that he's gotten back to his district shows that he's in tune with he's in touch with the needs of the district. And, people have pointed out that if he's not there, Sam Page, if he defeats Berger, he doesn't automatically become Senate leader. He just becomes another guy, right? Another, and likely a backbencher in the Senate because he would be so new. And so Berger says, hey, I'm the one who essentially writes or at the very least endorses or blesses these spending plans and these spending projects as they go out the door. He has gotten tens of millions of dollars for his district. And he says that shows, not just that, but also policy decisions shows that he's in touch with the needs not only of his voters, but Republicans across the state.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about what the candidates are campaigning on. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht about the 2026 elections. Paul, political observers say this race between Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page and Senate Leader Phil Berger is an ugly one. One even called it a grassroots slugfest. What did he mean by that, and what does this look like on the ground?
What he means is a lot of the fights that we're seeing, the rhetorical battles between Berger and Page, have to do with local issues. Keep in mind, people have been going to the polls in Rockingham County for 20 years, often simultaneously supporting Phil Berger and Sam Page. They're often, on the ballot at the same time. Now, Berger's terms are 2 years and Page's are 4. But now that they're running against each other, it's dividing people. People told me that it's dividing families even, with some people picking Berger, some people picking Page. These fights and disagreements playing out in on Facebook message boards and things like that. There are rumors that didn't make it into our story because they were hearsay, but talking about people threatening to protest one of the candidates or the other candidates. There are billboards out there. There are websites attacking the candidates. And just last month, we saw Sheriff Page go to one of the Rockingham County Board of Commissioners meetings and accuse them of basically withholding support for political reasons. Now, you may ask, why is he doing that? Well, it goes deep. This race goes deep. The chairman of the Rockingham County Board of Commissioners is one of Phil Berger's sons. And so, when you're in office, as long as these two have been, in Berger's case, you make friends in a lot of places. You have your own people in a lot of places. In some cases, in Rockingham County, that's one of his own children. And so it can get contentious, ugly, and rude, and very fast here, and personal.
Now, Berger, having been in office for as long as he has, he's got a long legislative track record. And you mentioned that Sam Page is keying in on several recent positions that he's held, sort of to illustrate his argument that Berger has lost touch with the district. Can you walk us through those?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up right now because it involves Berger's son, Kevin Berger, the chair of the Rockingham County Board of Commissioners. This goes back to 2023, and to understand the issue, we have to talk about how it happened. At the time, Phil Berger and other lawmakers here in Raleigh were considering expanding gambling in the state, and that would have potentially included a casino in Rockingham County and a couple other counties, but it would have been exclusive to those locations. Now, in preparations for that, the Rockingham County Board of Commissioners rezoned a piece of land that was about 190 acres. Well, people did not like that. Sam Page has talked about, the number of people who didn't know it was coming up before the board, and then they found out that some people had been in talks with a casino, with a gambling company, and how it all looked, whether or not this was the case, it looked like there was some deal already made behind closed doors, and nobody asked the Rockingham County residents what they thought. That was the perception. And so Page is capitalizing on that. He's saying, hey, I care what you think. Whereas these people, they were moving toward this casino deal without taking your input. Now, Phil Berger is quick to point out the casino is not here today. And that's in part, he says, because of the local pushback. So he says, hey, the fact that it doesn't exist at all shows that he's been responsive and that deals were not struck behind the scenes. And you can look at other instances in his record where he has also been responsive. So, depending on who you talk to, you get a different idea of how the casino drama played out. But that's where it started. That's where some of the resentment started to build among some of the Rockingham voters there.
There's also been this debate over shrimping, raw milk. There's been a whole bunch of things. It seems like Page is really kind of latching on to these things. Tell us about those.
What's interesting about that is this year there's a part of the Republican party in North Carolina. They have a bunch of committees, and one of them covers the 3rd Congressional District. And so there's a 3rd Congressional District committee. Well, earlier this year, they met, and they decided they didn't like that Berger let a bill advance in the Senate that would have put new regulations on shrimping. And they didn't like that there was a new bill that would have closed a loophole people use to sell raw milk. Now, neither of those became law, but they didn't like it. So what did they do? They went back and looked at Berger's endorsement of a Democrat in a 2022 judicial race and said, hey, we think this violates party rules. We're going to hold you accountable. We're going to pass a resolution that accuses you of party disloyalty. And they wrote all this out in this long resolution of, he endorsed this Democrat. We disagree with it. But also, these 2 bills advanced. And the chairperson of this committee admitted to me. She said, we thought this issue with Berger endorsing the Democrat had sort of settled down. But then when we saw these bills come up this year, we wanted to hold him accountable for something. Now, we can't vote him out, but we can, use this endorsement of a Democrat in 2022 to accuse him of party disloyalty. And so that's what they did. And one can't help but wonder if that would have happened if Page had not challenged Phil Berger. Do people in that district, smell blood in the water? Is this their chance to get a chunk of meat over someone that they have a bone to pick with? I don't know. But these types of things are coming up now that the campaign for Sam Page is off and running.
Now, some political observers have sort of speculated that Berger is almost legislating right now through the lens of this campaign. Can you give us some examples of what they mean by that? And also, what does Berger have to say about this?
Well, he denies it. He says that everything you see him doing in the Senate right now, he would have done with or without Page challenging him in this Senate district. Now, there are some things we've seen that were very public that people use to suggest that Berger is operating through the lens, basically viewing things through a campaign lens. The most recent being redrawing our congressional lines. There was let me start off by saying that means that they redrew North Carolina's 14 congressional districts to give Republicans more of an advantage. Now, they already hold 10. The new lines will give them a better shot of beating Don Davis, a Democrat, in the 1st congressional district. That would give them 11 of the state's 14 congressional seats in next year's midterm elections. We'll see. There was a group called Carolina Forward, which is a liberal-leaning organization that suggested, hey, maybe Berger's doing this so that he can get an endorsement from President Trump in this primary. An endorsement, of course, Trump is seen as sort of a kingmaker, right? Berger has come out and denied it and said, you know what, Trump months ago had said, he thinks Republicans in GOP-controlled states should consider redrawing their maps to help, his agenda. And so Democrats don't retake the U.S. House next year. And that's what Berger says he's doing. But then there are other examples, too. For instance, earlier this year, the Senate passed a bill called Senate Bill 50. It allows what's called constitutional carry. That is still that's been vetoed by Governor Josh Stein, a Democrat, this year, although there's still time for the legislature to override him if they want to make it law. But the sticking point here is that a very similar bill came up in 2023, and it did not make it through. And we spoke to one gun rights activist who said he thinks Page's primary challenge may have pushed Berger over the edge to finally pass this through the Senate this year.
What's the likelihood Page can actually pull off a win here?
Well, he is going to be outspent. When someone as powerful as Senator Berger is on the ballot and has a challenger, any challenger, the people with an interest in North Carolina's taxes and regulations are going to put their money behind someone who could help them or punish them. And so that's why we don't see a lot of state leaders losing, especially in a primary. But if anyone is going to do it, it would have to be, one would think, someone with recognition in the county, someone who's been around for decades, someone who shows up to meetings, someone, who, doesn't have a lot of negative press at all. In this case, Sam Page checks a lot of those boxes. He worked on Donald Trump's campaign in 2020. He's gone to the border to, he says, investigate how drugs and human trafficking enter our country and end up in his jurisdiction. He's been there forever. And, if anyone's going to do it, it typically is sort of a populist figure like him, who has built trust over the years, and people may wonder, like, well, don't people like that run all the time? No. Oftentimes in legislative races, both Republicans and Democrats, especially in far-flung parts of the state, they have to recruit people to run. And oftentimes these are people who have never sought office before and people who don't have any name recognition whatsoever. I would say Sam Page is several steps ahead of where most legislative candidates already are, especially the challengers. So, it's a long shot, but if anyone could do it, it's someone like him.
Going to be a very interesting race to follow. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
That's WRAL State Government reporter Paul Specht for his deep dive on the Burger-Page race. Go to the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.